In this video, we're going to discuss the visualizations in Quincy. There are a large number of visualizations. They're key to the way the product works. We're going to focus on a few that are most related to the workflow of an average reviewer. Specifically, we're going to talk about the map visualization, the timeline, charts, and social analyzer. I'm also going to show you a search report visualization, which is relevant but less so. And then I'm going to show you a playback feature, which ties these different visualizations together. The whole point of this video is not to go deep into any one of these visualizations. There are videos dedicated to each one of those, so review them if you want to figure out the ins and outs of using any one of them. This is more of an overview to give you a sense for the intent of these widgets and the general approach that Quincy has to visualization and to investigation. So let's go straight into the tool and play around for a few minutes. All right, to get any visualization to work, we have to log into the case or cases. You can log into multiple cases. Visualizations will work in multi-case mode. So we've logged into a case here. And before we start diving in, let me point out one sort of overarching concept in a number of these visualizations. Let's go to timeline as a way of illustrating this point. In timeline and in many of these visualizations, there are two types of visualizations. There is the case visualization, and then there is the grid visualization. The case visualization visualizes all of the data in the case. The grid just visualizes what you have pulled up into the grid at any given time. So right now we have 100 records in the grid. So if we went to the grid timeline, this would be a timeline visualization of those 100 records. Whereas if we go back to the case timeline, and we hover over this, you can see that this one section of the graph has over 1,100 items in it or associated with it. And that's far more than the 100 we have pulled in here, so it must be graphing something different. And in fact, it is graphing all the data in the case. Why do we have these two different types of visualizations? Well, it's pretty intuitive why you'd want to graph all the information in the case, give you a sense of what data you have and what the times associated with it are. But we also wanted to give you the ability to select a group of data based on some attribute, or maybe you've labeled them and you've filtered down to the label set or whatever. Maybe you're trying to tell a story with the data, and you only want to include the data relevant to that story, and you want to have a timeline there. That is why we also have the grid timeline, because the goal of our visualizations is twofold. One is to help you unearth insight in the data, and two is to then enable you to share that insight with others. So this timeline, the case-based timeline, gives me a good sense of the relevant times in my data, and I would immediately look down at this sort of January time frame as probably pretty relevant to the data set I have, given how much data is there. I might also be interested in some of the outliers. But then once I've done my investigation and I want to share that information with someone, I'm going to want to filter down to a specific data set and graph that in the grid timeline and utilize that in the context of a report. So that's an overarching concept I want you guys to understand. The next important concept is that the visualizations are interactive. If you click on parts of a visualization, the grid or the overall case will react. Now, the best way to show this, the best visualization to illustrate this one is the charts one. So let's go into the charts one, and I'm going to reduce this down. You can see it enables 6 different charts at once, but we really don't need this for this example. In fact, I only need one chart, so I'm going to just drill down to this one. And let's go and visualize based on file category. And we'll throw in labels so that we know what we've got. Okay, you can see most of our data is emails, and then we've got some graphics and documents and so on and so forth. Now, let's go to the grid, pull up our data set, and now let me show you how these things are interactive. We are on the case-based visualization. So this is showing all the information in the case, which is why the counts are so large, right? Let's say we want to see our graphics. All we need to do is click on that section of the graph, and you see it turns red, indicating you are now filtering on the graphics. These are all graphics. If we click it again, it will go to black, meaning we're now filtering on everything except for the graphics. And one third time, and the filter will be removed. So, and that applies for the case level as well as the grid level. So let's go to the charts and do a similar exercise. Only now, again, we're graphing the data in the grid. So let's make sure we have a column that we want to graph. You can see these are all the different columns in the graph, in the grid, and it allows us to filter on any of them. I'm looking for file type or file category. Let's just type that. Let's just do extension. There we go, object extension. All right, that's an easy one to graph, and it's an easy one to understand. And now we'll include our labels again, and we can see, all right, these numbers are much more in keeping with the 100 we would expect based on the 100 we have in the grid. So we've got 88 JPEGs and a bunch of other stuff. Let's see if we want to look at the docs. For some reason, we have docs in this data set, and let's go ahead and filter down on the docs. We clicked, there were 3 of them, and boom, here are the 3 documents we have access to, or that we have filtered on. If we click it again, it will turn black, and now you can see we have stripped those out, and one last time, and the data is back. So again, those are that's the other sort of overarching thing I wanted to draw out about the different visualizations, is that they are interactive and you can use them to investigate your data. Okay, so let's talk about what visualizations we have. Let's close those down. We talked about the map, which, as you would expect, is just a map, and it allows you to plot things on a geolocation basis. The data needs to have geolocation information for it to work. There is the social analyzer, which allows you to effectively view communications in a very simple way. There is the timeline, which sort of lays everything out on the timeline, and then there are the charts. In terms of average investigative work, gaining insight into the data, the charts are very good to give you an overall view of what you have, but then become less effective in terms of an investigative tool and more effective as part of a reporting tool. The map, the social analyzer, and the timeline, though, can be very powerful in both investigative as well as reporting contexts. So let's jump into the map and quickly take a little tour of this. It's not overly complicated. You can see it's just a map of the data, and again, there is a video on the map widget if you want to explore that. We had said it was interactive, so let's go ahead and explore the interactive nature of it. Much like with the chart widget, you can utilize the graphic to manipulate the case data. So if I go shift and then grab an area and draw a cube over it, it will zoom in. But if I now want to filter on this, I can do control and draw another box, and it will result in a filter on my data. And of course, if I want, I can go clear that filter, and it will restore the data set. And I can zoom back out if I want. Again, you can just weave around the data. Now, the last thing I want to point out that's a general concept about all these investigative visualizations, so the map, the timeline, and the social analyzer, is you're going to see these play buttons, VCR-like buttons. They allow you to do playback, so they allow you to play the data in a timeline-oriented way. So if I click play, what it's going to do is take me to the first data, and you see it's going to move around the map, showing me when these events or when these pieces of data occurred on a timeline basis. So let's go ahead and stop that. It's pretty straightforward, but it allows you to again utilize the visualization as almost a storytelling tool. So let's close this one and let's remove our filter again, and let's go into the timeline and do a similar type exercise. Let's go into the case-based timeline. And you can see there are container groups here. These are things that happened within the same month, because you see we've got our data clustered by month. We can cluster it any number of different ways. Again, we're not going to spend much time exploring the specific widget, because there are videos on the timeline widget if you want to spend time there. But let's just go look at how that playback works again. We go click play, and it starts on the left, and then it just slowly walks us through our data, and you can see the data moving here. And if you want to speed it up, you can go ahead and speed it up, and you can see that the data will respond, and we'll start to move through it a little bit faster. I think there's quite a lot of data in this cluster, so it'll take a while before it moves beyond the cluster and then starts to finish up the data. And no need really to wait for it. Let's just go ahead and stop it, and that will reset us. Now, the last thing I want to show you is the social analyzer, just to give you a sense of how that widget works. And then I'm going to show you how all these things tie together. So let's open up our social analyzer. Our social analyzer graphs email, so let's focus on email. It also graphs phone mail, any sort of communication, phones, chats, whatever. It is slow to build, so it requires that you press this. It doesn't build automatically as some of the other visualizations will. It's built out now, but you can hardly see anything at all. To see something, you have to select a set of recipients, and let's go ahead and do that, and we'll select everybody, and that will then show us all the different lines, all the different sets of communications that have occurred, who emailed who. A name that shows up a lot has a big dot, a name that's shows up less frequently has a smaller dot, and then the frequency of communication is based on the thickness of the line. And you can zoom in, zoom out, do all the same kind of things we had done before, and we can play this data same as we had done with the other widgets, and it will just walk through the data. See, this is the communication that's relevant at this point, and it will just go through it exactly the same as the other widgets have done. Let's go ahead and stop that. And let's show the last point that's worth seeing here, and that's how all these things tie together. So if we put map up on the screen and we put timeline on the screen, the cool thing about the timeline graph is that it is, if you will, a parent to these others. So if we go, let's give ourselves a little bit more real estate here, get rid of those headers. If we press timeline, play on the timeline widget while the other widgets are open, it will not only play this, but you'll see it will activate the other widgets to the extent that those other widgets are relevant. So let's see if we can speed it up here and see some flashes. There are no geolocation data in this set that we're graphing here, but let's see if we can get some email to flash for us. It may take a few seconds, but we should start to get some emails to flash here because I know there are communications. Now, there are reasons you can see emails passing but not flashing. There was one. And that's because we've only graphed 100 records, and so the complete message might not be in the 100 records that we graphed. But if we set up the data set properly, we could have these things. There's one triggering off at the same time we're moving around the map, at the same time we're viewing stuff. So that's another feature of these visualizations that's really worth understanding is, again, that they are interactive and they are interlinked. And so those are the visualizations I wanted to take you through in the context of this quick demo. Hopefully that gives a flavor for it, what we have available. I apologize, I just realized I didn't show you the report widget visualization, so let's spend a few seconds just there. And to do that, I'm going to clear out all these other visualizations. The punchline, though, of this widget is not going to be any real different than any of the other ones. It just is to articulate that we have visualizations for search. So we're going to go ahead and search on, I think government is a good search for this data set. We'll see. Hopefully I'm right there. All right, great. We got hits. And let's look at the data. Okay, we have 4 messages here. The hit count will show you how many times the word appeared. And then these are the actual hits. The visualization of this data allows you maybe a little bit more insight into the data, maybe not. I'll let you guys be the judge of that. But let's show how this visualization works. What the visualization is we searched on the word government. That's the big blue circle. Everything in the big blue circle represents documents that have the word government in them. But then you have 4 subcircles, right? And those 4 subcircles are based on the frequencies of other words that appear in this document set. So let's click on analysis, and you can see that pulls back, zooms in the data set, and you can see that there's one document that has the word analysis in it, and it also has the word projects in it. And this is just really meant to be a tool for helping you visualize your searches and get a sense for what other documents, what other terms might be useful, might be relevant. Let me just refresh this search so we get a little bit more real estate here. And then let's do that again. Let's do it here on new. We click down on new, and that brings us into this one Adobe document where the word year happens with high frequency. So, and that makes sense. It's clearly new year. And so not particularly insightful there, but a useful visualization nonetheless in terms of giving you the ability to understand the results of your search in a way that hopefully will add an additional amount of insight and enable you to get to critical data or interesting data or relevant data more quickly. So that's a quick summary of some of the visualizations. Again, All of these visualizations, all of these widgets I've shown have videos dedicated to them. If you want to drill down and learn more about them, I'd encourage you to watch those videos. Thank you very much, and I hope that was useful.